Welcome to the Loved Called Gifted podcast. This is your place to come for musings about spirituality, identity and purpose. I'm your host, Catherine Cowell. So in this episode, I am really delighted to be joined by Hannah Lamberth. Hi Hannah, thank you ever so much. We met at a retreat, so a few months ago now, and got on really well. And one of the things that we did as part of that retreat was sharing reflections, and you had a habit of bringing some really profound, really interesting, well-written stuff. Do you want to introduce yourself a little bit?
I'm Hannah. I am almost 40 and have plans for quite an extravagant celebration. So I'm planning to embrace my 40s rather than fear them. And it handily falls on the Sunday of a bank holiday.
Oh, brilliant.
Which is marvellous. I mean, that's excellent planning from my parents many years ago.
Well, well done your parents.
Yeah, well done, Mum.
So the most important thing about you is what you can do for your 40th. So what are you going to do for your 40th?
Oh, a big party. I love people, I love music, I love laughter. So I actually quite like a gin and tonic or a glass of wine or, half a bottle of vinegar. So yeah, lots of food, fun, laughter, people. And I think post-COVID, it's made people really think about what they love and what they want to spend their money and their time on. And it turns out I'm a massive socialite and I just want to be with people eating all of the time. So I drag along into that world my long-suffering husband, Dave, and our two children who are 12 and 8, 2 girls. Life is full. We live all together with my father-in-law as well. Mm-hmm. When people say, oh, I'm a people person, and you kind of think, oh, that's a bit of a kind of vague non-thing, but I'm more embracing my people personness the older I get, and just, I really, really love being with people, socialising, hearing stories, having a coffee or lunch with people is just my favourite thing in the world to do. So yeah, I am a people person and proud of it.
Fantastic. Talking of people, I have asked my son upstairs to kind of keep the noise down, but there's no guarantees that he will. So we might just have to pause for a moment and redo something if there is noise. Or we might just leave the naturalness.
Yeah, and the reflection I'm sharing today actually fits in extraordinarily well with
the possibility of interruption.
Well, I would say the guarantee of interruption.
I think life has a guarantee of interruption, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah, so having shared about the fact that you're a massive people person, I noticed that the title of your reflection is Finding Silence.
Yeah.
So here is Finding Silence by Hannah Lamberth.
Okay. I walk in search of silence. 60 minutes with one instruction. Quiet. No washing machine shouting at me to tell me it's done. No Amazon deliveries. No phone call from school, desperately hoping it's nothing to worry about, rather than your child's finger is pointing the wrong way and you need to take them to A&E. No email notifications with another task to add to my to-do list. No shouting from downstairs as my deaf father-in-law gives instructions over the phone of how to do online banking to his even deafer sister. Just 60 minutes with one instruction. Quiet. Except it seems that the memo wasn't delivered. Not to the cars in the distance, nor to the planes in the sky, nor to the workman fixing the lawnmower with his drill, or the team who've chosen this moment to chainsaw a fallen tree. The memo wasn't delivered to the birds in the trees who are mid-choir practice for tomorrow's dawn chorus, or the sheep who have evidently started a debate club and have reached the passionate climax of their argument. The memo wasn't delivered to the farmer with his plough, nor the whistling of the passerby. And so my walk in search of silence feels impossible. So much noise. None of it louder than the noise in my mind, of my to-do list, my questions, my embarrassments, my failures, the choices I need to make, my regrets, my pride, my worry, my question of who am I? Did I mention my to-do list? So how? How do I escape the noise? How do I stop and sit and block out the noise? The silence is deafening.
Thank you. So you wrote that whilst we were on retreat.
Yeah.
In the context of the fact that we were all invited to go and spend just 60 minutes in the morning in quiet.
Yeah. And when we were invited on this retreat, there was mention of spending some time in silence, and we had a WhatsApp group of people who were going on the retreat, and there was a lot of responses. You'll remember, Catherine, of people freaking out at the thought of having to be quiet and having to be silent, and oh my goodness, I can't. And it quickly transpired it wasn't a silent retreat where we had to spend 5 mute days, but just 60 minutes a day. And I think that I went wanting to embrace it because life is so noisy, and, you know, I'm a massive socialite, but also life is full and we've got lots going on. And we've been talking today about just the struggle in finding that space. So when somebody says, here you are, have a retreat, and then every day you get an hour, you think, oh, wonderful. Like, you know, it's going to be glorious, and I'm going to think all these thoughts, and God's going to talk to me, and it's going to be marvellous and wonderful. And actually, the reality is that noise isn't just made up of Amazon deliveries and phone calls from school and washing machines, and even in the quietest place in the countryside, noise is there, and none of it is louder than thought. And how do you stop and be still and listen? And at that point in the retreat, I felt a real jarring of this, a real discomfort, and a real sort of, I don't know how to do this. I felt really ill-equipped to be quiet, and having done, 12 years of parenting, I think that creates a lot of excess noise, doesn't it?
Yes.
Having kids.
It does.
And so, I felt really ill-equipped. And I think, we were challenged to share, if we wanted to, what had happened in the silence. And I think I walked into that room and I thought, actually, what's happened is I felt really frustrated. I can't switch off my mind. I can't switch off the noise. Even in the most lovely surroundings and environment, this is really tough.
Yeah. One of the things that I loved about that reflection was just the honesty of it and the really clear description of what that noise feels like. You'd think, oh, it's all going to be tranquil. And then suddenly you realise that it's not.
Yeah.
And then maybe there's a reason that you keep the radio on all the time. And there's a reason that it's quite helpful to, you put the music on in the car, because actually there's also noise going on inside.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we often have these thoughts of, people talk about their quiet times and their, I go for these sort of long walks in the hills on my own, and people talk very positively about having those sacred spaces where they can be on their own. But I think, like all things, there's a flip side to that, and there's another side to that. And when it's so juxtaposed to your everyday, it's a skill that you have to acquire and you have to learn and you have to work at. And it's symptomatic of maybe deeper things that are going on. Why is it that we can't block out the noise? Why is it that the thoughts are really loud? And it's helpful sometimes to actually call it what it is and say, this is really tough and I don't know what to do.
So did it shine a light on particular things that were going on for you, that kind of, well, actually, I can't be quiet?
Yeah, I think I'd always felt a real guilt. Like my mum and dad are wonderful, just the best people. Every morning they have a quiet time. So my mum has always found a space in our house, and every day the door gets shut and everybody knows it's mum's quiet time for as long as I can remember. Even when I was tiny, I remember that was mum's space. And I think for me, that was the kind of the mecca of quiet times, the kind of that's what we need to aspire to. And I'm a very different character to my mum in some ways. I think, when you get older, you realise you're more like your parents than you think sometimes. That's definitely happened to me. But I think I saw that as the gold standard of a relationship with Jesus. That you have to have that half an hour or that 20 minutes quiet time every day. And I think it confronted me with the reality that I felt like a terrible Christian and like I did not have my stuff together, and it had been a struggle. And maybe the reasons why it was, what was it? You can take me out of the noise but you can't take the noise out of me.
Yeah.
And actually, how do I have those intimate times with Jesus despite not being able to sit and do meditation and contemplative, because that feels like a real barrier. And so, and I'm not saying that stuff's bad at all. I think it's excellent and it's great, but it can't be the only thing in order to connect with Jesus.
Oh, completely.
That was a real kind of revelation of, because in the retreat that we went to, we were very much immersed in that we are loved sons and daughters of God. And so how does being a loved daughter of God go hand in hand with the noise in my head? And the two can sit together hand in hand.
Yes. Because interestingly, parents love their kids even if they're loud.
Funny that.
Isn't it? Love is not reserved for the quiet introverts who'd like to sit in the corner and read.
Yeah.
So have you found ways that those two things have kind of come together?
So I've always loved writing, and I write blogs, and I remember very little about school, but I remember writing real life.
Yeah.
Is something that I love doing, and actually have struggled to find time to write. I had a blog for a little while, but life. And I think I have found that writing in those quiet spaces for me really helps to focus my mind and help me to hear. And I think a lot of, if you don't trust the voice that you're hearing, it's easier to drown it out.
Yeah.
And I think actually writing it out means that I can reflect on it and go, oh, actually that doesn't feel right at a later point, or let me develop that thought a little bit more. So I think for me, actually, in writing down that silence wasn't there and it was really hard, has actually given me a tool to be able to embrace the silence and wait for God to speak and me to channel that through writing stuff down, which I guess is journaling, isn't it?
Yeah.
Effectively. But I've never been very good at stuff that feels like a solution to just do this and then you'll be fine, and just do this and then you'll be fine, because I'm inherently a rebel. I don't know if you knew that about me, Catherine. But I don't really like the rules, but actually, so call it journaling and I won't do it, but call it just hanging out with Jesus and seeing what he says and writing some stuff down, then I'm fine with that.
Yeah, because journaling's gone a bit cool, hasn't it?
Oh,
it's a bit
I do.
on trend.
Oh, on trend.
You wouldn't want to be on trend, Hannah.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. No way. That would mean that I would have to have one book where I write stuff, whereas what I have is post-it notes and random notepads that when you say to me, why don't we talk about some of your reflections? And I say, excellent, and have to look in 15 notebooks before I find the one that I wrote in. Oh dear. But actually, having that quiet space, and I think, I'm still on a journey with that. I'm still trying to find those times when I can sit and listen and write. And I think partly actually I'm good when there's accountability in that. So Catherine and I went out for lunch today, and then she made me walk along the canal, didn't you?
I did.
Drop me off in a random car park in Stoke and then made me walk along the canal on my own.
That sounds awful.
Yeah, you did.
It was, can I point out, this is a car park next to a nice pub next to a canal.
Yeah. It was in the back end of Stoke, and there was
in a village.
But apart from the being dropped in a random car park, it's a bit like Hunted, isn't it? Find your way back.
I resist this portrayal.
but actually having that time was great, and I feel like I was able to write some stuff down and think about some stuff that I want to do, and it was so helpful. And a few weeks ago we'd had a really tough time at work, and a colleague and I just spent the afternoon together, and as part of the processing what was going on, we said, let's go and have 45 minutes on our own, let's go off, have a think, see what God says. And she came back with some thoughts, and I came back with another piece of writing that I'd jotted down. And I think when I do it, it's so helpful, so helpful. I just need to, it's that not falling into kind of religious, I have to do it every Monday morning and Friday lunchtime or whatever, but actually because life is chaotic and my circumstances are extremely chaotic at the minute, and I don't know what I'm doing one day to the next, but actually when I do have those moments of I can have an hour, is embracing it.
Yeah, and embracing the fact that it's not going to happen all the time.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think one of the interesting things which people kind of overplay is the fact that Jesus sometimes went up a mountainside to be by himself with God. What we don't know from the text is how often he did that. And so quite often what comes back is this expectation of Jesus went up the mountain. He must have done it every day, therefore you must do it every day. And we don't necessarily know that because things were chaotic and because there were crowds around the place and there often wasn't space in Jesus's life. So maybe it was like those gems that you get where sometimes there was the opportunity to go and do it. But we don't know how often it was.
Yeah.
I don't know how many times it's recorded. If it's only the number of times that we've got in the Gospels, it wasn't very often at all.
Yeah.
If it was the mythical quiet time, well, he was obviously up the mountain every morning, or maybe it was more often, but we don't know.
Yeah. I think also it's not the only way that I connect with God. It's not.
That was going to be my other question, which is, where do you connect with God in the noise? What are the noisier pieces of connection? Where else does it happen?
I think it happens all the time, doesn't it? You can be in a hospital room having those sudden moments where you see the Spirit at work, or you go for a coffee with a friend and you're reminded of something that God has done, or you see the kindness of a stranger. I mean, I think parenting gives you multiple times where you have to just trust in Jesus and sit and hear the quiet reminder of the value in the everyday. And I think so often I fell into the trap of I have to live this sensationalist life, these where I make this big impact and I have these big moments. And I think, we grew up with the Toronto Blessing. And, I grew up as a teenager in that era of big, tangible moves of God where he would do something amazing. And actually, so much of God is in the making spag bowl and serving your kids and picking them up from school and laying your life down for other people in some capacity is so like Christ, isn't it? I just think there are these beautiful moments that we can see regularly and hear from God, and these just nuggets all the time that we can miss if we pursue something too grandioso.
Yeah. When we were talking earlier, you were talking about the fast and the slow work of the Spirit. And that interesting observation, actually, that in Jesus's life, the fast work of the Spirit often happened when he met somebody just the once and something really significant happened. But actually with his disciples, that was much slower.
Yeah.
And parenting is like that, isn't it? So I'm just thinking of my two who came home aged sort of 3 and 5, having had a difficult time elsewhere. So we've not been a family for the length of time that they've been alive. And that has been slow.
Yeah.
But it's been all of those little, consistent, lots and lots of little moments of connection and love that have deepened our relationship.
Yeah.
And I think back to my own Christian life and how angsty actually I was and how scared of God I was when I was a Christian sort of in my early 20s. And I don't feel like that anymore. And it really mirrors that journey that I've seen my kids go on of kind of entering a new family, a new home, really very, very scared and scared of connection and scared of relationship. And I'm not saying that all of that has completely disappeared, but we're sort of 11 years down the line and there is a real softening and a relaxing and a joy in being together that has grown.
Yeah.
In the same way that for me there is a real joy in being with God that has grown. I'm not so scared anymore. But it's been a slow work of the Spirit. Yeah. A slow work, but a beautiful one.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I would say the kind of word that describes my last 10 years has been, 5 years at least, but has been one of unlearning.
Yeah.
Unlearning the falsehoods that I've absorbed from all over the place. There is not like one person that I can credit my bad theology to effectively. It was I just felt the constant need to please God and to do better because I wasn't good enough. And that was just overarching, this desperate need to be acknowledged and this desperate need to be seen as good enough by God, and just learning that I am good enough because he is good enough.
Yeah. Yes. And what is love about if it's not about delighting in someone?
Absolutely.
So how we get to this point of constantly telling one another that we need to try harder and do better because God is probably a bit disappointed is the underlying message, isn't it? You're obviously not praying hard enough, because you need to listen to this sermon and decide that the best thing to do now is to pray more.
Yeah. My oldest daughter had obstructive sleep apnea. Until she was 7, she had her tonsils taken out. So it's where tonsils are so huge that your airway blocks during your sleep. And she had this horrible condition that we didn't know what it was, and she didn't sleep ever. You know, she would sleep for an hour at a time and then wake up, and we were in this perpetual cycle of just being awake felt like all the time. And I remember going to somebody and just being like, I'm broken. But, you know, anyone with a new baby, just that tiredness of I haven't slept and I have to be responsible for someone is crippling. And I remember them advising me to get up earlier to pray was their advice. And at the time I tried it for one day, and I was more broken than before. And now I look back and I think, and I don't think they would say the same thing now, because they've grown and they've been loved by Jesus, and but I just think, oh my goodness, that's some of the unlearning that you have to do, is that, and now I think if that was my child going through that with their child, I would say, give me the baby, go upstairs and have a nap.
Snooze. Yeah, absolutely.
Have a nap. And you're great. Keep going. But, I know we've talked about the angry God culture that has been around. And I just think so much of my last 5 years has been learning that God delights in me. He delights in me, and he loves me, and he loves me, and he loves me. And that's the most important foundation, rather than he's angry with me and I must try harder.
Absolutely. So coming back to your silence and that retreat, I wonder how God spoke to you in the days following that, having confronted the silence thing and still having several days worth of get up for an hour and spend time. I wonder if you were able to be more relaxed in the ones that came afterwards.
No, I don't think I was at all. I think I got really grumpy. I struggled. I don't think I had this epiphany on day one of, oh, lovely, here, silence is to be embraced, and I'm going to write and it's going to be marvellous. I think I really struggled with that, and I wrote a couple of reflective bits after that, and I think there was just a real kind of awareness of, sometimes when stuff gets brought into the light, like if you've got a weird lump and then finally you go to the GP and you go, oh, I've got this weird lump, but oh, it's nothing, it's fine, it's just, and they go, oh no, actually it's a problem and it needs cutting out and removing. And I think that retreat for me was an exposing time where God shone a light on some of my stuff that I had to give back to him, and that was painful. And I didn't really know anyone on the retreat either, I'm delighted to have met the people that I did and have formed friendships, and it was a real time of blessing as well. But it's hard when you go into that arena and there is a sense of loneliness and, well, what do I do now? Because it's lovely having this stuff exposed when you're in the safety of a nice venue and nice food that you're not cooking and you're not washing, and you don't have anyone else to look after for those few days. But actually, when you're back in the thick of it and in life and in the reality that the biggest thing was exchanging my thought process of being a servant of God who was never quite good enough to a child of God who's deeply loved and is enough. And I think, it sounds really trite and a bit kind of,
But it's actually profound.
Oh, it's utterly profound. It's profound. And I think, I've heard that so many times, you're a child of God, you're a child. But you sometimes, God does some heart surgery on you. Yeah. And that for me was a bit of a heart surgery moment, which has been profound since. Yeah. But it, was incredibly difficult at the time.
Yeah. I would observe, though, that, you're talking about, you often hear people saying you are a child of God. I would observe, though, that frequently that happens in the context of people who are also saying to you, but you need to pray more, you need to do more of this, you need to do more of that. And there is something about having permission to simply be yourself and being in a place where you are being encouraged to just relax and be yourself, and where there isn't a whole pile of, well, we're going to work harder and we're going to do more. So I wonder whether there was something about that lack of expectation to kind of come away with a sort of spiritual to-do list that was maybe helpful.
Oh, really helpful. And I think I went expecting to come home with a spiritual to-do list. And I think, the gold standard, like I said before, for me had been half an hour quiet time in the morning with God. And I had to come away almost not having that to lean on, because it actually is comforting when you have something to aspire that will sort your life out, but actually, because your life isn't sorted out, it's because you failed. It puts your hope in you.
It also keeps the expectation of change in something fairly small and theoretically manageable. So if I can just have a quiet time, and it will be better. I just need to do a bit better at having my half-hour quiet time. So you're right to come away from that and say, that thing doesn't work. So that's not going to be the answer. There are lots of things in life like that, aren't there? Where there's this sort of, if you just become fitter, or if you just lose some weight, or if you just sort out the right way of writing your to-do list, then that will sort it all out.
And it's that tension between the fast and the slow, because sometimes it is an instant change in behaviour that can unlock something in your relationship with God. It is that dealing with that thing that you've always struggled with and verbalising it and praying into it, or there is that creating a new habit that can do something, but actually it is that slow learning and discipleship and filtering out the rubbish and learning more of God and the still small voice and the just slowly following him and trusting him. And even when I'm not doing all of those things that I should be doing, that I've been taught are the fruit of a Christian, are reading my Bible, praying, giving to charity. And actually the fruit of the Spirit is love and patience and kindness and
mainly love.
And mainly love. And mainly love. And actually that stuff takes constant learning and unlearning, and it's this like beautiful patience that God has with us and allows us in his kindness these kind of spaces to go, I love you first and foremost, I love you and I love you and you're not my servant, you're not here to fulfill a list of things to do for me, you're my child and I love you. And that is a hugely vulnerable place to be, because you don't have the crutch of something that you can do to prove that you're good enough.
Yes, you just have to be.
Yeah.
And you're also letting go of that crutch of, well, I'm almost there, but I just need to sort these things out.
Yeah.
It also interests me in our conversation that actually you started off by saying, I'm embracing the fact that I'm a people person.
Yeah.
And then you talked about the silence.
Yeah.
You talked about the silence and the trickiness of that and discovering the journaling. And then one of the things that I've noticed is that actually the journaling becomes easier in the context of other people. So, for example, being with your work colleague who said, and you both said, well, we'll go and spend a bit of time. And then you did your journaling and you came back. So, there is something, isn't there, just about embracing the way that we are and we do things.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, again, that's been a revelation fairly recently that it sounds ridiculous, but not everyone is a people person. And it is a gift.
It really is, yeah.
And I think I always thought, I'm a people person, but everyone's a people person if they just do. But actually, the thing that doesn't float my boat is a tick list and a to-do list and having to, I think I referenced that in my reflection that, did I mention my to-do list? And it is like a dark cloud over my head. Whereas being with people is sunshine to me. So actually, how can we do the things that are good for our soul in the way that is helpful? And
for you, there's an element of adding some community into that, adding some people. Even if the only thing that the people are doing is saying, oh, well, let's both disappear off in different directions and do some reflecting and come back.
Yeah. I wish I had embraced parts of my character sooner than I have.
And that comes back to believing that somebody delights in you.
Yeah.
And thinks that those things are really cool.
And has created me to be that. You
Yes.
know, I have been
Yeah.
created to be around people.
Yeah.
And I think that gives you a kind of like, oh, wow, actually God's created me to be like this. So how can we do that together? How can we bless people? How can we love people? How can we do that with this thing that he's put in me, like the gift of administration? You know, every church who handles a budget is desperate, aren't they, for some kind of financially savvy administrator who, for the benefit of God's people and the church and the bride of Christ, can use their gifting. And I think, gosh, actually, there's a real responsibility to have in the gifts that you have, and it can be used as a real blessing.
Yeah.
Like, it's a great thing for God to put something in you and how he's created us. And so, yeah, I'm just
remembering, maybe we'll finish with this, the quote by the great Saint Oscar Wilde, who said, "Be yourself, everyone else is taken."
Yeah, absolutely. It's really hard when we look at the kind of gold standard of Christianity when it doesn't fit with who you are. So we have to rethink that. We have to, and actually the gold standard of being a Christ follower is love.
Yeah. So let's do more love and less lists.
Definitely, unless you're a list person.
Yeah. Thank you ever so much, Hannah. That's been great.
Thank you for having me.
Hope you enjoyed this episode of the Loved Called Gifted podcast. If you'd like to get in touch, you can email lovedcalledgifted@gmail.com. You can find a transcript of this podcast at lovedcalledgifted.com. And that's also the place to go if you're interested in the Loved Called Gifted course, or if you'd like to find out about spiritual direction or coaching. Thank you for listening.